When we conjure an image of a whale, our minds often drift to one of two extremes. We picture the gentle giants, the colossal blue-tinted shadows that glide through the ocean's deep, filtering entire worlds of krill. They are symbols of peace and magnificent scale. Then there is the other extreme. There is the killer. The most dominant apex predator in the water today is, arguably, a kind of whale. This is the orca, technically the largest dolphin, a marvel of cooperative, intelligent predation. We have seen them hunt virtually anything. They drown great white sharks. They team up to wash seals from ice floes, and they even harass and kill the calves of the gentle giants themselves. They are terrifying in their efficiency, yet even today's successful predators don't look truly nightmarish. Their appearance isn't unsettling in the way a shark's jaws or a colossal squid's form can be. But a long time ago, in an age far closer to the dinosaurs than to our own, there was a whale that had a deeply unsettling appearance. It was a creature that looked unlike anything seen in the oceans today. This prehistoric nightmare wasn't just for show. It was a multi-ton super predator, a hyper-carnivore that was perhaps the first marine animal after the extinction of the great mosasaurs to truly claim the title of apex. It was capable of, and perhaps specialized in, hunting its own kind down. And the strangest, most paradoxical thing of all, you can find the bones of this giant carnivorous whale in one of the driest, most famously arid places on Earth, the Sahara Desert. This was Basilosaurus. While it is now famously known for its remains bleaching under the Egyptian sun, the first chapter of this creature's story was written in the New World. The year was 1834, and in the humid expanse of Louisiana, a group of paleontologists uncovered a diverse, staggering range of different body parts. In 1834, paleontology was in its infancy, grappling with the new idea of successive dynasties of extinct giants. The remains found in Louisiana were massive in size. They were not a single, neat skeleton, but were strung out over an area of land greater than a modern soccer field. The paleontologists knew right away they had discovered something monumental, but they had absolutely no idea what it could be. At the time, no extinct whale had ever been properly discovered or understood. Based on the sheer size of the bones, they concluded the only thing it could have been was a real-life sea monster, a creature from myth made real. The vertebrae were enormous, and their elongated shape led the discoverers to believe it must have been reptilian in nature. Its body shape, which was unusually narrow and long, did not match anything seen in marine mammals of the day. Instead, it more closely resembled the postcranial structure seen in snakes or mosasaurs. Based on the size of its vertebrae, they estimated a creature of unbelievable proportions, perhaps 100 feet long. This misclassification led paleontologist Richard Harlan to name it Basilosaurus, a name which translates to the king lizard. Sadly, this initial error was only the beginning. The story of Basilosaurus would be plagued by blunders. The most infamous was orchestrated by a naturalist and showman named Albert Koch. Koch was a P.T. Barnum of bones, more interested in spectacle than in science. He acquired several different Basilosaurus skeletons and, in an act of paleontological butchery, stitched them all together to create the skeleton of a single serpentine monster. He called his creation Hydrakos, the water ruler, and claimed it was a genuine sea snake, 114 feet long. He took this chimera on a roadshow to fascinated crowds. It would take the keen eye of Sir Richard Owen, the brilliant British anatomist who would later coin the very term dinosaur to resolve the confusion. When Koch brought his monster to London, Owen examined the fossils. He immediately recognized the fraud. More importantly, he examined the teeth. The teeth were the key. They were not the simple, conical, uniform pegs of a reptile. The skeleton possessed complex and varied teeth. There were sharp, curved canines at the front for gripping, and, crucially, multi-cusped, serrated molars in the back for shearing flesh. This was a hallmark of a mammal. Owen recognized it at once, a primitive, gigantic whale. By scientific convention, the first given name, Basilosaurus, had to be kept, even though it was completely wrong. The king lizard was, in fact, a king whale. With this new information, it was finally reclassified and added to its very own family of cetaceans, the Basilosauridae. This group is defined by a strange, primitive feature: small but well-defined hind limbs, complete with femurs, lower legs, and feet. This family is an extremely important, pivotal chapter in the evolutionary story of whales. They are likely the first fully aquatic whales to evolve. The descendants of land-walking mammals, who had generations before, returned to the sea. Basilosaurus itself was one of the first members on the scene, having appeared around 41.3 million years ago during the Eocene epoch. Within this family, Basilosaurus was by far the largest. Its appearance on the world stage made it possibly the first animal to evolve after the extinction of the mosasaurs that was capable of preying on and challenging the large sharks. After the great asteroid impact 66 million years ago, sharks had reigned supreme in the oceans for millions of years. Now they had a rival. While it was indeed massive, it wasn't the 100-foot-long giant of Harlan's or Koch's imagination. Current estimates for the larger species, Basilosaurus cetoides, suggest a matured length of up to 20 meters, or 66 feet. The slightly smaller species, Isis, grew to be around 18 meters, or 59 feet. This would still make Basilosaurus one of the longest whales alive today, but ironically, it wasn't as heavy. Its body was heavily streamlined and narrow. Some have remarked its silhouette did resemble that of a mosasaur. While a modern humpback of 50 feet might weigh 40 tons, Basilosaurus at 60 feet may have only weighed around 7 tons. Some researchers, however, think this number is much too light and believe it was closer to 15 or 20 tons. In either case, its stature not only made it the largest predator within its environment, it also made it the largest animal on Earth for a good duration of its existence. This rendered it the planet's undisputed apex predator. But it wasn't size alone that granted it this title. Like any great predator, Basilosaurus had a wicked weapon to complement its size: its killer jaws. It is even arguable that it had one of the most terrifying-looking mouths and sets of teeth of any known whale. Its head was proportionally robust and armed with a battery of large, bulky, heterodont teeth. Unlike modern toothed whales like the orca, Basilosaurus had a mammalian toolkit. It had canines at the front and molars in the back, but these were not our molars. The molars of Basilosaurus bore extremely large, deep serrations, like the blades of a steak knife. These teeth were for cleaving through chunks of tough flesh. The presence of these two types of teeth, gripping canines and shearing molars, strongly implied that it likely chewed its food, tearing it into smaller pieces before swallowing. This behavior is not seen in modern whales. This hypothesis is corroborated by extreme wear and tear found on fossilized teeth, which also implied that it could chomp down with ridiculous, bone-shattering power. This was proven. Reconstructions of its skull and musculature estimated that Basilosaurus isis, the smaller species, could bite down with 20,000 newtons of force. For perspective, a large saltwater crocodile, one of the strongest biters today, hits about 16,000. Basilosaurus could bite harder. It could easily crush a human femur, the strongest bone in our bodies, 5 times over with a single, shearing bite. With such a vicious weapon, Basilosaurus could hunt virtually anything it wanted. Amazingly, we don't even have to guess. Science has found the receipt. A highly unique specimen was located with its stomach contents still in place. This fossil within a fossil showed that these whales had a preference for large bony fish and sharks, including species of the Otodus genus, the very group that would eventually yield Megalodon. What's more, they also discovered the remains of another whale inside its stomach, the Dorudon, a fellow basilosaurid. Dorudon was not a small animal, reaching 5 meters or 16 feet in length, but to Basilosaurus, it was simply lunch. To make the situation more grisly, general studies on Dorudon skeletons have found that dozens of them, particularly juveniles, had catastrophic head damage. This damage was consistent with the size, shape, and spacing of Basilosaurus teeth, confirming this whale had the power to puncture thick skulls. This is a smoking gun. Basilosaurus was a whale killer. It likely killed its prey by targeting the head, crushing their skulls, and then using its serrated molars to tear their bodies apart. It was a specialist. Its menu also included primitive sirenians, sea turtles, and other primitive whales. This brings us back to our initial paradox. How does a 60-foot-long ocean-dwelling super-predator end up in the middle of the Sahara Desert? The answer lies in one of the most remarkable fossil sites on the planet. It is a desert valley in Egypt, over 200 kilometers from the Mediterranean Sea. It is so littered with bones, its name is Wadi Al-Hitan, which translates to the Valley of Whales. Back in the early 1900s, researchers located numerous pristine fossils here. They quickly deduced they belonged to Basilosaurus and its prey, Dorudon. They also unearthed other animals, including the semi-aquatic Moratherium, a distant ancestor of the elephant, and ancient pelicans. This collection of animals led paleontologists to realize that 40 million years ago, the Sahara Desert was not a desert at all. It was partially submerged beneath the waves. During the Eocene, shallow, warm waters from the ancient Tethys Sea, the precursor to the Mediterranean, covered nearly 20% of the Sahara. The Valley of Whales, it was long believed, represented a vast mangrove environment. The high concentration of skeletons suggested it was a rich coastal hunting ground. However, recent studies have pushed back on this belief. Further analysis found what was once thought to be fossilized mangroves were actually just the fossilized burrows of some large, unknown animal. This means it is not certain if this ecosystem was really a type of mangrove forest or simply another kind of rich, shallow coastal environment. But whatever the biome, it is clear that Basilosaurus had a superior role in it. The sheer number of fossils found is staggering. What's interesting is that this abundance was not a sign of it being a social creature, like the orcas who live in pods. No, all evidence suggests Basilosaurus was a solitary animal and was quite hostile to others of its own kind. We believe it was a loner because of its head. The skull of Basilosaurus lacked the adequate space for a melon, the organ in modern toothed whales that is responsible for echolocation. The lack of this organ heavily implies it did not possess this ability. Its world was not one of seeing with sound. Whales without this ability tend to be on the solitary side. Instead of echolocation, it possessed something else, something that made it utterly unique among whales: visible hind limbs. This whale had legs. They were severely reduced in size, vestigial and useless for walking. Each one measured only slightly longer than a school ruler. They were absurd, tiny appendages on a 60-foot monster. This has not stopped some from making the bold claim that these legs gave Basilosaurus some ability to move on land, perhaps even using its little feet to stage ambushes on a beach. The vast majority of paleontologists do not support these controversial claims. The limbs are simply too small to support a multi-ton body. The preferred idea is that if they were used for anything at all, it was to help guide their long, awkward bodies during mating. They were likely claspers, evolutionary remnants repurposed for a new, aquatic life. And speaking of their strange, elongated bodies, it is believed their shape forced Basilosaurus to adopt a rather creepy way of getting around. Unlike modern whales, they did not have a large, powerful tail fluke to rely on for propulsion. Their tail muscles were also found to be relatively weak. This means they swam in an undulating fashion, like an eel or a sea snake, but on a giant, terrifying scale. They did not swim from side to side like a reptile. The evidence points to them moving in an up and down motion, much like how a wave travels through water. Paleontologists assume Basilosaurus was not a speed demon, incapable of sustained chases. It would, for the most part, slowly tread the waters, its long body rippling beneath the surface, only unleashing bursts of surprising speed when it was ambushing prey from below. What's more, the morphology of its vertebrae showed that in life, they were hollow and filled with fluid. This basically made Basilosaurus extremely buoyant. It was a creature of the surface, sticking close to the top of the ocean at all times and completely incapable of performing deep dives. This was obviously good news for any deep-sea dwelling creatures, but for those near the surface, it was just even more bad news. The misfortune kept piling on for its prey. Basilosaurus was one of the first, if not the first whale to have developed ears that were highly adapted for its environment. They not only allowed it to hear clearly underwater, but they were sophisticated enough to allow it to pinpoint exactly where sounds were coming from. So, even if it couldn't see you, even if it couldn't echolocate you, as long as you were making enough sound near the surface, you were never truly safe from its clutches. This combination of traits, a massive serpentine body, bone-crushing bite, serrated teeth, acute hearing, and a preference for the ocean's sunlit zone, allowed it to become highly successful. Its reign was long, and its kingdom was vast. Its fossils have been found from the United States to Peru and across North Africa and Pakistan. It was clearly the king, and this domination would last for an extreme amount of time. This whale is known to have existed for over 7 million years, from 41 million to 33 million years ago. But alas, at the end of the Eocene epoch, it disappeared. Its vanishing aligns with the worst extinction event to have taken place since the demise of the non-avian dinosaurs, the Eocene-Oligocene extinction event. The trigger for this grand coupure is unconfirmed. The two top contenders are a massive glaciation event that locked up the world's water and caused sea levels to plummet, or a large impact event. Whatever the cause, the world changed rapidly. The warm, shallow seas that Basilosaurus and its family had adapted to thrive in began to disappear. The planet grew colder. These whales, specialized for a world that no longer existed, were especially hard hit. Only a handful of cetacean genera made it out alive. Sadly for the king lizard, this did not include itself. In fact, not a single member of the Basilosauridae family survived the Eocene. Their entire evolutionary branch was cut short. All that were left of the whales were the Neoceti, the ancestors of today's baleen and toothed whales, who would evolve in a different direction and continue to survive until today. Basilosaurus was an evolutionary experiment, a strange and terrifying chapter in the story of life. It was a land mammal's first, monstrous attempt to retake the seas, a serpentine nightmare that ruled the waves for millions of years before vanishing forever into the sands of what would one day become a desert.